Magic the Gathering Foundations is going to be coming out this weekend, or at least the pre-release is, but then all the cards are legal at pre-release, so like, I mean, really, it's kind of the same thing no matter how you look at it. We just kind of have these cards playable and usable irrespective of whatever weird words are attached to those ideas. Anyway, that means there are a bunch of commanders from Foundations that are going to be dropped into the Commander format, and we also have some stuff that is going to be dropped into the Standard format, and I may even be doing some Standard decks as a result of this. Who knows? Who knows? There's also some other formats that have come up lately that I want to talk about this week. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on. So let's go ahead and start with something a little comfortable, a little tried and true. There is a deck tech that I want to talk about because there is a creature who I love in Commander, and that's Koma. Now, not the original Koma, but this Koma. This one right here. Now, granted, I love the original Koma as well. I run him in a variety of decks, and I know a lot of people have problems with him, but this guy right here, this guy feels good, fair, and wonderful. This feels like a culmination of everything the original Koma was doing, but without being designed by a crack addict. Let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to be building this big Simic boy, and hopefully have some fun on the way. Koma World Eater is a Simic twice and 3, 8, and 12 big beastie commander. It can't be countered, and it has trample and ward too. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get to make 4 of these 3/3 Koma's Coil tokens. Now, the original Koma made these every single upkeep for every player's turn, and then used the coils to tap creatures and become indestructible. Instead, this Koma just has Ward 4 and makes all of the Serpent tokens at the same rate, basically, but only once, the minute it smacks somebody in the face. So, this is going to be a commander that, unlike the original Koma that yielded itself to a very slow, meandering control playstyle, this Koma instead will lend itself to a more bombastic Voltron commanding style. And I think that's going to be a much more healthy way to play this anyway at our pods if we want to be invited back to them after we're done. Now, we do want to make sure that Koma is able to attack the turn he comes down, because even with Ward 4, it's very likely somebody is going to hold up the removal to just snipe him on their turn for the betterment of the entire table. So sometimes we're only going to get 1 or 2 attacks in with him, period, so let's make those attacks count. First, let's go into the 6 ways we have to force our commander to have haste when he drops on the board, with Cloak of the Bat being the first one. This gives flying and haste with an equip cost of 2, meaning we want to go ahead and wait a couple extra turns after we can play Koma in order to play Koma, so we can set up stuff like this. Fleet Feather Sandals does the exact same thing for a little bit of extra money. Haunted Cloak gives Trample, Haste, and Vigilance with an equip cost of 1. Hero's Heirloom gives 2/1, and if the creature is legendary, gives Trample and Haste, so our Koma now is going to be a 10/13 hasty boy. The Strider Harness can also give him +1/+1 in haste, and Instill Energy is going to be one of my techs in here that I think is a bit spicier. We can use this to enchant Koma, untap it if he is locked under any stunning style effect, and then that creature will be able to attack the turn it comes into play, so it just gives haste. It untaps a creature and gives haste, but it is an aura that we get to drop on to Koma. Now, this means that the turn he comes out, we should be able to generate all of our tokens. But in the meantime, we need to make sure that the attack that we get is able to do maximum damage. So with all the equip cards we have, let's go ahead and drop in a Brass Knuckles so that our Koma can have double strike, and Brass Knuckles has the benefit of creating 2 of itself when it comes out. So as long as any equipment, not just Brass Knuckles, is on Koma, it will have double strike if one of our 2 Knuckles is attached to it. This will give us a little bit of flexibility because people are very likely to snipe this card off the board, like they will do when they see our Fire Shrieker that gives an equipped creature double strike. If Koma has double strike, he should be able to almost one-shot a player, so people are going to be throwing whatever blockers they can into him to protect themselves. So let's again make sure that when he does make impact, it is making maximum impact. But a strategy of combat cannot be built on Koma alone, and as you'll see when we get later on into the deck tech, there is plenty of stuff in here to benefit us from combat damage. After all, that is what our commander is trying to do. So how can we take some of this double striking equipment, how can we take some of this combat damage centric gameplay and focus it in such a way that we are able to get benefits even when Koma is not on the board? Well, let's go ahead and have a bunch of little evasive guys and a little bit of more evasion to add into the deck as well. Let's start with Zephyr Boots. This gives a creature flying, and if it deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card and discard a card. Simple, throw it on Koma so that he can just punch in the air. That's all fine and dandy, but in terms of evasion, we also want to have cards like Looter Il Core with Shadow and the ability to let us draw and discard cards when it punches people, letting us get through our deck and chip people's life down as we go. Shoreline Looter does the same thing, but if we hit threshold of 7 cards in the graveyard, then we can draw the card without discarding the card. Suspicious Stowaway has the same looting effect, but it has a daybound ability where it can just draw us the card instead of drawing and discarding if it makes impact while it is a werewolf. And Wharf Infiltrator, when it deals combat damage to a player, same thing, draw, discard, and if we discard a creature card, of which the deck has 24, we can make a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi token, which will give us more ways to protect ourselves from edict effects like Fleshbag Marauder. Like I said, once we get into more of the deck tech, you'll understand why we are adding in so many other ways to do stuff besides just what the commander is trying to do in terms of creature power and doing combat, even though this is mostly going to be a Simic Voltron strategy. But, you know, we might as well go ahead and get into that. Let's talk about drawing cards. Now, because we have so many looting effects, we only need to run about an 8-card draw package this time around, and a lot of this is going to be built on combat damage draw, since that is what our commander enables so well. So let's begin with Bident of Thassa. Anytime a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. We also have a pseudo-goad effect we can strap on as well. Coastal Piracy does the same thing, sans the goad, as does Reconnaissance Mission. Each of these not only will draw us when our Koma touches somebody's face, but also whenever one of our looters touches somebody's face, allowing us to draw 2, discard 1, letting us dig through our deck and get all of our best cards at a really good rate. We're also going to run a Harmonize for quick and dirty draw, a Garrick's Pack Leader so that we can draw 4 cards anytime our commander touches somebody in the butthole, Jolriel, Voice of Zalfir, which can turn our lands into green-blue birds, which can also help lethal players, Tatiova, Benthic Druid, so that anytime we drop a land on the board, we can draw a card and gain a life, and the Sphinx of Clear Skies, which says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top 2 cards of our library, because we have Domain of 2, where X is the number of basic land types we have, and opponent then separates those cards into 2 piles, put one in our hand and the other in our graveyard. So this is basically going to be looting, right? This is looting for this deck with no other stipulations. It's also got Flying and Ward 2, so it can chip damage on people very, very well, and synergizes well with cards like Reconnaissance Mission and Coastal Piracy. All in all, these should help us dig through our deck because we need to make sure our opponents are not able to win the game outright against us. We need to have a very hefty removal package so that during the turns we do not have Koma out, we are always preventing our opponents from straight up winning the game. So let's get into that package. We are going to be running a hefty 20-card removal suite, but again, this is all in service of making sure that our commander has a clear pathway and no problematic win cons are kept on the board. Let's begin with Caustic Caterpillar. We can sacrifice it to blow up an artifact or an enchantment. Bite Down lets us take any of our creatures and have them kill another creature effectively. Rabid Bite does the same thing. Cosmic Hunger does the same thing. Canker Bloom can blow up artifacts or enchantments, as can Return to Nature, but this can also get rid of cards in graveyards. Voracious Varmint is the same as Canker Bloom and Caustic Caterpillar. Root Out blows up an artifact or an enchantment, or allows us to investigate and draw if we need that instead. Reclamation Sage comes on the board and blows up an artifact or an enchantment. We can use cards like You Find a Cursed Idol to blow up enchantments, artifacts, or create a treasure token to ramp a little bit and then go into the dungeon to get a scry off of the initial dungeon ability. Yes, I slipped Dungeon into Koma, as I am always going to do. We also have a couple of ways to counter spells in Negate and Cancel. They are very, very basic ways to stop other spells from happening, but they are low in cost, and we are a budget deck, so they work out perfectly fine. We have repeated ways of getting rid of artifacts or enchantments with Trigon Predator. We can use Wolf Strike to give our Koma 2-0 and then have it blow up a creature. Kellen Inquisitive Prodigy can repeatedly blow up artifacts and also lets us investigate. Slice and Twain blows up an artifact or an enchantment while also drawing a card to replace itself. Acidic Slime is a great blocker as it has Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, it blows up an artifact, enchantment, or a land. Meteor Golem is kind of an auto-include in any deck I have that has lots of mana, as it can blow up any problematic card on the board. Terastodon can get rid of 3 problematic cards so long as they are not creatures, and Woodfall Primus can blow up any non-creature permanent as well, and it has Persist, so whenever it dies, it's going to come back on the board and do its thing again. We're also going to be running 2 board wipe style cards. One is Consuming Tide. Each time you use this, every player chooses their favorite non-land permanent and bounces everything else back to their hands. We're going to keep Koma and then just be in the best position possible. Then we have Oblivion Stone, which lets us put a fate counter on a card and blow up any card that does not have a fate counter on it. You can spend 8 mana on this and have it just be a, board wipe for everything if you're not set up. But if we are set up, we can use this over the course of a turn in order to keep our commander on the board and otherwise blow everything else up. Whew. 22 ways of blowing up our opponent's cards, which should be enough to let Koma have breathing room. So, let's talk about ramping up to his big fat boy status. We do have a huge commander, so we have to have plenty of ways of ramping up to him. So we have 19 ramp spells in this deck, beginning with Font of Fertility. This is a Wayfarer's Bauble lookalike that comes down for a mana and blows itself up for 2 to get a basic land onto the battlefield. There's also Wayfarer's Bauble, which is another Wayfarer's Bauble lookalike. Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth can enchant a land and give it the ability to tap for additional mana. Explore lets us draw a card and grab an additional land when we play it, as can Growth Spiral, Plantar Genesis, but it lets you look at the top 4 and then do it, and Coiling Oracle. All of these are effectively versions of the same card. Dawn Treader Elk is very close to Font of Fertility in function, with the mana costs flipped. Rampant Growth grabs a basic land from the deck and puts it on the battlefield tapped, as does Farhaven Elf. Unstable Obelisk allows us to blow up permanents later in the game, while also being a 3-mana rock. Honored Heirloom does the same thing, but instead of blowing up permanents, it lets us get rid of cards in graveyards. We're a budget deck. We need to make sure that all of our cards have maximum utility. Then we have Overgrowth, which can enchant a land to let it tap for 2 extra mana. Search for Tomorrow, which grabs a basic land from the deck and puts it on the battlefield untapped. We can also play it on turn 1 with its suspend cost. Then we have Wood Elves, which can grab a forest from the deck of any variety, including dual lands. Explosive Vegetation, which grabs 2 lands from the deck, puts them on the battlefield tapped. And Hour of Promise, which grabs 2 lands from the deck, puts them on the battlefield tapped, but it can grab any lands, not just basic lands. That is a lot of ramp, and it should allow us to get to what we need mana-wise for Koma very, very quickly. But we still need plenty of lands to play, so let's talk about all of those. We are running 21 basic lands, with 13 of them being forests and 8 of them being islands. Our dual lands, we are going to be running Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Overflowing Basin, Temple of Mystery. Yes, I know, it's a temple. The Surveil lands have warmed me up to temples, okay? I don't hate them in 2-color decks. Vine Glimmer Snarl, because it can come into play untapped. Simic Growth Chamber to bounce any of our utility lands. And a Tangled Islet, because we can search this with Wood Elves or any other card you power creep in your deck that can grab a forest or an island, like, say, Farseek or Nature's Lore. Then we have 7 fetching lands like Blighted Woodland, which ramps us, Myriad Landscape, which can ramp us, Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wild, and Escape Tunnel, which just grab any basic land from our deck, and Shire Terrace and Promising Vein, which do the same thing, but they can actually be lands that come into play untapped and operate as colorless lands until the promised time. We also have a Pit of Offerings as a utility land to get rid of more problematic graveyard cards, and a Tectonic Edge to get rid of any non-basic land and opponent controls, which will also be very, very helpful. If somebody has a Glacial Chasm, that turns our deck off entirely, so we need to have multiple ways of getting rid of those problematic cards, rather than just folding to them and accepting that they exist. That all said, that is all the ramp we are running in this deck, all the lands we are running, and we've covered everything that the deck does. What we haven't done yet, though, is told you how to play the deck. So, let's go ahead and see if we can get an opponent killed by turn 8 or 9 in the gameplay section. Let's talk keepable hands. Our commander costs a fuck ton. We need lots of ramp. We also want some removal. Anything else is superfluous. So, looking at this, we have 3 lands, 2 sources of ramp, and 2 sources of removal. Our lands are Forest, Island, and Command Tower. We have Meteor Golem and Return to Nature to get rid of problematic cards, and then we have Wood Elves and Search for Tomorrow to ramp. This is an ideal hand, so let's go ahead and draw our first card, play a Forest, tap it immediately, and suspend our Search for Tomorrow. We go into our next turn, and we have a Looter Ilkor and a Cloak of the Bat. Let's go ahead and drop a Command Tower down, tap 2, and put the Looter down so we can start digging through our deck. We move on to turn 3, and we draw a Temple of Mystery. Now, we don't need the temple right now, but what we can do is we can drop it down and get our Scribe. You see we have a Haunted Cloak, which will give our commander haste when it comes down. That's actually pretty good, but we already have a Cloak of the Bat, so we don't need this yet. So we can go ahead and put that on the bottom of our library. Let's go ahead and tap 3 and put Wood Elves out, now that we know that Looter Ilkor doesn't need to find anything specific. And let's pull the Tangled Islet out of our library. The Tangled Islet comes into play tapped thanks to Wood Elves. Even though it brings in things untapped, it doesn't matter for this game because, well, it always comes into play tapped. And now we punch somebody with a Looter Ilkor in order to draw 1 and discard 1. We have drawn an Overgrowth, and let's go ahead and assume we're not in a game where we need the Meteor Golem so much. We'll hold on to our lower cost removal. Going into turn 4, let's go ahead and play an Island and tap 2. And get Coiling Oracle out and see what we get. It is another Forest, so we get that on the board. We can then tap 1, 2, 3, and put an Overgrowth on top of Tangled Islet, and tap the Tangled Islet to drop a Cloak of the Bat on the board. Let's go ahead and punch somebody with Looter Ilkor to draw 1 and discard 1. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana, so we do need the Promising Vein. We'll go ahead and get rid of the Return to Nature. Moving into turn 5, let's go ahead and play the Promising Vein and tap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 5, 6, 7. And that gets Koma on the board, and we can go ahead and pay 2 and immediately give him Cloak of the Bat and punch somebody in the face for 8, which will spawn us our tokens. We'll also swing with Looter Ilkor to get that draw discard, and we don't need the escape tunnel, so let's go ahead and throw that away and move into turn 6. We've drawn an island, and we are doing very well on lands. We don't need those right now. So, if we are in a position where we need the tokens up as blockers, we will keep them up for that reason. And we're going to go ahead and eliminate one player completely. We're going to play Brass Knuckles, getting our copy of Brass Knuckles, and we are going to attach one of these Brass Knuckles to Koma, keeping our real Brass Knuckles over here. This way, Koma can punch somebody, spawning 4 tokens once and 4 tokens again. So Koma has now made 12 tokens total, which is a phenomenal amount to make on turn 6. Now that Koma has made 12 tokens, and he's got flying, and he's got double strike, he's eliminated one player off the board. Looter Ilkor has attacked a different player, drawn as a card, and decided we did not need the Shire Terrace, so he's gotten rid of that, helping us filter down into only useful cards. Now we move into turn 7, and we have a Dawn Treader Elk in hand. Let's go ahead and eliminate another player off of the board, or at least get them very, very close. If we swing everything out at one player, they probably die, and that's probably what we do. Find the player that is most threatening and aim 16 commander damage and 3 times 12, 36, 37 damage in everything here at one player. This player is now taking 50, 60 damage, and we are getting our Fabled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more Koma tokens so that they will be able to block and be prepared for crackback from the next player. Looter Ilkor let us draw Zephyr Boots and discard a Dawn Treader Elk. We can go ahead and play that island so that we have it in case our commander dies, so we can be in the same position we're in right now. And there you have it. If we move into turn 8, we just aim Koma at the player. We can sorcery speed, get rid of a creature that could have blocked it with Rabid Bite to clear the way, but that player is dead. They're gone. They're eliminated. Koma has killed them. He's also spawned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more Koma tokens. So this is our final board state. 20-something Koma tokens, Koma hitting for 16, a Looter Ilkor making sure that we have nothing but gas on top of our deck, and a hand that is really low, but enough mana to where we don't really care. That's the position we find ourselves in when Koma comes a-knocking. Maybe he's not as fair as I thought he was. Maybe he's not quite as fair as the original Koma. I thought the original Koma was way more broken, but this guy seems to be doing pretty well on his own. Anyways, let's see what happens if we have a little bit of extra money, shall we? If you're upgrading this deck, there are a few things you can do, and adding lieutenants as well as adding in some supplements to already existing game plans is probably the best thing you can go for. And honestly, there's no lieutenant I can think of that works better than Koma Cosmos Serpent himself. He can't be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, he makes another blue serpent coil. He can use the new Koma's coils to great effect. Honestly, having this Koma in the 99 is more fair than having him in the command zone, but just as deadly. So I would use him. Also, to supplement Tatyova, let's add AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait. And if we're going to benefit immensely from the Koma coils, an Essex Fractal Bloom would be great. So the Essex allows us to turn all of our tokens into a copy of something. For us, copies of, say, Looter Ilkor, or any of our looters at all, is probably best because they can't be blocked, and they are wonderful for cloning purposes because then they have all kinds of amazing evasion capabilities. You can also do things with, like, Sakashima to get multiple copies of Koma this way if you really want to be a fucking dick, I guess. But speaking of evasion, let's also add in a Wonder, because Wonder can let us have flying Koma coils. If we want more Koma coils, we can use Fractured Realm, which says that we can trigger the ability of any permanent once more on top of that. We can also create token copies of a creature we control with this if we want. Let's supplement our draw power with a Rishkar's Expertise, drawing lots of cards and playing a spell for free. Return to the Wild Speaker, which gives us a pseudo overrun effect while also letting us draw cards equal to the highest power on our board. Orin Frostfang and Enduring Curiosity can both draw us cards when our creatures make impact with players' faces, and the Frostfang also gives Death Touch, which has wonderful synergies with Trample. For those who don't know, if you've got Death Touch and Trample, you only ever have to assign 1 damage to a creature, and then the rest of the damage tramples over, because with Trample, the rule is you only have to assign lethal damage. So once you assign the lethal damage, everything else is just gravy. And then we have Tribute to the World Tree so that we can make a bunch of stuff happen. So this works beautifully in this deck, because if one of our tokens touches the board from Koma, we draw a card, but if one of our looters touches the board, instead it comes down as a 3/3, letting us end the game that much quicker for our opponents. Honestly, very few cards in the game do as much work for us as Tribute to the World Tree. We can also get a stronger rant package by adding in 3 visits: Skyshroud Claim, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, and Nature's Lore. Each of these allows us to get particular lands at a very good rate and speed, and they're the best in class at what they do. We just can't afford to put them in every deck. We have more ways of hasting our commander if we add in a Lightning Greaves and a Swiftfoot Boots, and of course, if we are going to supplement our removal package, let's get rid of a couple of the fight spells and add in Arcane Denial and Counterspell, so we have more ways of controlling the board at instant speed. And, well, there you have it. This is a very straightforward Voltron-style Koma deck. It brings Koma out, Koma touches somebody in the face once, they hurt. He touches them again, they die. And that's really the entire game plan. Everything in this deck is made to be focused and work with that one game plan in mind. Obviously, you can add in some overpowered stuff like a Cyclonic Rift or a Fierce Guardianship if you really wanted to put this deck over the edge. And MDFCs are another great way to push this even further in your favor, adding in even more ways to remove cards from the board without having to change any of the mana values or anything in the deck. More protection with cards like Simic Charm and Heroic Intervention can also be done, but honestly, I think if you start with this, you will be on a very good path to victory. The commander itself doesn't exist yet, but when it does, I'm hoping he drops under $1 so that this is no longer a lie of a deck. I try to have all the $15 commanders be $1 or under, unless they are unreleased and therefore don't have real prices associated with them yet. That all said, hopefully you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed making this. I think you're going to have a blast with Koma, and he's going to blast your opponents into smithereens. Go have fun playing Commander, everybody. Let's have fun with Foundations, and I hope we get some more people playing Standard as a result of Foundations. That all said, thank you for watching. Go to my Patreon, support me if you want to help me continue doing videos like this. And I have a Discord opened up. There's a Magic the Gathering section over there if you want to play some games. There's also a World of Warcraft section for people who are doing Season of Discovery and some other games as well, if that is your vibe. Check the description for all that. And as always, everybody, insert in the video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full-time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full-time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.